Adria Lafferty is a registered nurse and graduate of the Tom Rose School. She's competed and tried dogs in Protection Sport Association and IGP, currently training in American Schutzhund. She's been working with pet clients, sport working clients, and local police departments. Recently relocated back to West Virginia and is starting up her business there. Huge passion for helping owners, connecting and understanding their dogs to improve the bond and their life together. She loves to work with canines and working dogs with a love for the German Shepherd and the Malinois breed. Without further ado, please welcome the one and only Adria Lafferty. So the first one we're going to be doing is puppy biting.
Puppy biting. Almost everyone that has a new puppy has this problem that we have to sort through. So the first thing that I tell people is just what you said. They're all variable. Some puppies are going to be way more into biting than other puppies. But in general, there's three kind of big things we can do to stop this. But the main concept is we want to stop this behavior. So in order to be clear to our dog, which is what we always want to do, we don't want to live in that gray area. I want them to know exactly that I do not want them biting my skin, okay? For puppy biting, we want to make this something that the dog does not have fun doing. One is with a leash. You can attach a leash to your puppy. The second they start to bite your skin, and I mean the second their teeth touch your skin, they should be getting a communication from you to say, I do not like that and I do not want that. You can do that with the leash by kind of popping the leash, making little pops until the dog stops doing what they're doing. However, most dogs do not care about that enough to really get that message that we don't like that. The other thing you can do as well is to just take your thumb, stick it in the puppy's mouth, push slightly down and back on their tongue. They will pull back from you. That's your sign to say, okay, they kind of understood that communication. What 99% of puppies will do is come right back to kind of test that again. But they'll come back a lot lighter. So they'll just touch you with their teeth, do it one more time, and you'll see them kind of click over into, all right, biting is not fun, okay? Now you can do this. The hard part's when they're biting your kids, or kids are not going to effectively be able to do this. So I would use the leash in that scenario.
And now, what about people that may not want to use one of those correctional techniques? And this is something I've mentioned as well, because you will see it on different videos, and it's redirecting them to a different toy. Now, that's something that I recommend to people, but I also let them know that by redirecting them, it's not going to stop the behavior. And it's because all you're doing is you're giving the dog a different toy. Now, right. Is that something that clients have success with? They just have to constantly redirect. What have you seen from that?
Yep, these methods are much quicker. The dog is going to get the message much more quickly, which is what I always go for. I want them to understand right away what the expectation is. So that's a very clear delivery. You can redirect. So if they come up to you, you can grab their toy and have them tug with that instead of you, almost like you refuse to let them bite your skin. We're not playing that game, in other words. You can get there that way as well. You just have to be ultra consistent, because anytime they start to bite your skin again and you don't sort of do what you need to do in order to tell them we're not playing that game, they'll keep wanting to play that game usually. So as long as you're being clear and you're consistent in your redirection, that usually works pretty well for a lower drive dog. There's some dogs that they're just going to keep on pushing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I like the leash pop technique. That's usually what I tell people to go with. And then grabbing the lower jaw is another one that I tell people to go with, where you hold it just enough to get the puppy to pull away, where they realize that's not a fun game. Always with my own dogs, I've always redirected because I personally don't care about the biting. But of course, with some people, they have thin skin, or they don't want their kids being bitten by the puppy. And the desire to fix and correct that behavior in a timely manner seems to stand true with a lot of people. So those are some excellent techniques. Anything else on that one? Are you ready for the next question?
I think we can move on.
Okay.
Oh, one thing I want to add about that. Sorry, Nate. When you're using a leash pop, don't pop away from you. That dog usually takes that as like another play kind of signal. They want to run back and do it again. Pop into you, and they'll kind of be shoved in and then have to pull back. So it's kind of a more clear way to do it.
That's a great detail to add, and that makes me think of something else that doesn't have to do with that question, but it's still worth noting. people, when they want their puppy to play with a tug, what do they always do instinctively? They go to push it in the dog's mouth. And what does that do? It does the opposite effect. The dog doesn't want it shoved into their face. So correcting into the bite, in a sense, we're using that technique to get the dog and making it as clear as possible, which of course, clear communication is the most important thing. So you ready for the next question?
I'm ready.
All right, dogs jumping up on people or jumping up on furniture?
So as with everything, you want to be clear. So jumping up on you, this is another good leash technique with the popping in. So if they jump up on you and we're pushing them off, and usually people almost half pet their dog, they'll touch them, push them off, the dog comes right back, and then there's this back and forth of the game and we get frustrated. So instead of pushing them off of you, use your leash. And a lot of us dog trainers, advise puppy, if you have a new puppy, to let it drag a leash around your house. So you have a quick access to stop these things or correct these things without having to play tag or grab your dog. So you could grab your leash the second the dog jumps on you. The number one thing to do is not to pet the dog. We don't want the dog to think we like that. So we don't want to interact with the dog when it jumps on us and pet it and hold its feet and do all these other things with it. Make a point right away, grab the leash, say no, pop, 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 pop towards you. And I'm not talking super hard pops. It's just a message. So pop the leash towards you to where the dog's almost pulled into your body and they're going to come off themselves. That distinction is very important. They're making the decision to come off of you versus us pushing them off, okay? So that's a big distinction. I always pair no with it or whatever my, no word is. Some people have different words, but be consistent in what you use. Pull them towards you. You'll see them come off and then they'll try and do it again usually. Do it again, and then anyone else they jump on. So if you're standing here and they're not jumping on you, they're jumping on somebody else, I'll do the same thing, but I'll make the dog sit, okay? Just so they don't, then I can reinforce my sit instead of them just doing this jumping back and forth thing.
Definitely. And something that I always like to, as far as options for people that view my channel and learning how to train their dogs, of course, not everybody wants to correct their dogs. Now, I'm a true believer in balanced dog training, which corrections is a part of that. So for somebody that may not want to correct their dog for jumping up, what could be an option for them to work through it, which, as we know, it will take longer if they're not using the correction. But if it makes them happier about the training, then what's a good option that you have for people that don't want to use positive punishment in their training?
Yeah, so you would consistently the dog will not get anything out of jumping, meaning they're not going to jump on me and get petted. They're not going to jump on me and get food. They're not going to jump on me and get any sort of interaction they want. So that may mean turning around and just ignoring the dog. Sometimes you can almost act like, no, and just kind of walk away like you're uninterested. And the dog's kind of like, oh, geez, well, that didn't get me anything. It does take you longer, but if you don't give the dog something they're wanting from that scenario, petting, interaction, food, whatever you have, some toy in your hand, they're not going to do it as often after that. And if you do have something in your hand and they're jumping up to get that, I will make them sit and then give that to them that way. So they know you can't take it from me and you're not going to get it from jumping. You're going to get it from sitting or not jumping or doing anything else that I'm asking you to do.
So using negative punishment, which could take longer, and then the faster results, positive punishment, which is the direction I recommend for people that the dog jumping up could be dangerous. So what I always tell people when it comes to this issue, if it's dangerous or destructive, then you definitely want to correct right away. So let's say you have your grandparents, they come over often. We don't want a large dog jumping up on them. If you have younger kids, you don't want the dogs jumping up on them as well, because in these situations, it can become dangerous. So those are corrections that we're doing right away. We need to eliminate that behavior. But if you're a young single person and you have your dog and it's not a risk to you, then that negative punishment technique could be a good option. So thanks for sharing that as well. Do you have anything else you want to add on that as far, furniture as well?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Furniture too. So also with jumping on people, if I have somebody like a grandparent or a young child that's short and small that could really be hurt by the dog jumping, I'm going to combat it even before they jump. So I'm going to have the dog on a leash before anyone even gets there, make the dog sit, and then try to structure your greetings that way. Then you can catch the dog a lot more quickly if they're going to jump, and you kind of get them away from that scenario so you don't hurt anybody. With furniture, so furniture is one of my favorites because all of us, everyone thinks us dog trainers don't let our dogs on the furniture. And we do. We do. Our dogs live in our house and do goofy stuff just like all of yours. But the big thing is that I can tell them to get off and I invite them on. So I do furniture, and I don't even use a leash for this most often. I let the dog come out. If the dog goes to get up, I kind of stop them. No, get off. I push them off or make them get off physically. They get off and usually they'll kind of put another paw up or creep back up again. No. So here I am with the consistency. No, you're not getting up here right now. Once they accept that, which is an important step for me, they accept that and kind of move on, or they lay down, or they don't try to get up again. Here in the next couple of minutes, I may say, come on, and I'll pat the couch and either say up or whatever word you want to attach to it. Come up, couch, anything you want to say, I'll let them up. Now, the other piece of it is to get off. So I usually attach the word off to that so they know, hey, get off the couch. And I make them get off, whether I have to kind of scoot them off or use their collar to kind of teach them to get back off of the couch. If you're consistent with that, and the hard part's when you have multiple family members, everyone kind of needs to be consistent with that for it to really work well. But if you're consistent with that, then your dog they'll come over to the couch and kind of look at you and wait for your up command. If you don't want to let them up at that time, you do not have to. And they can stay off and understand, maybe there's guests over, we don't get on the couch right now. And that's how I do couch.
Yeah, and I prefer to do it that same way too, treating it as a command. So if we want to let them up, we can give them that command. And if not, we can tell them off if they do violate the rules, or at least they know to wait for us. And then if somebody never wants their dog on the couch, then they just do what you said as far as anytime the dog jumps up, we just don't allow it. We say off, and then whatever we need to do to make sure the dog gets off the couch. And of course, and not letting the dog manipulate the human in any way, like laying down and giving those puppy eyes like I don't want to come off, or the other extreme where they might growl. And of course, we don't want to leave them up when they do that either, because then you'd be reinforcing the growl. So when you say off, you have to make sure you get those pups off. All right, perfect. Anything else on that question?
I don't think so.
So the next question is going to be, and this is another big one, of course. Well, these are all big ones. Separation anxiety. What can people do to prevent separation anxiety from happening, or at least mitigate it, depending on the dog's genetics? Or if they are dealing with separation anxiety, what can they start doing to reduce that from their...
Yeah. So first, I always tell people, separation anxiety is a broad term for a lot of things. Some people think separation anxiety is just whining when you leave. That's pretty common for dogs to do. What I see is big cases of, they're destructing the house when you're gone, things like that. So in order to kind of not go there, I always tell people when you get a new puppy, don't, put it in a crate while you're there for 15 minutes, half hour. So it starts to get used to the idea that there's no routine when you leave, because a lot of dogs get nervous when they go to the crate because now someone's leaving for a while. Okay. So if you get them used to kind of being in the crate a little bit here and there, or just teach the dog a place command, teach them something where they're not following you like a Velcro dog around the house all day. If you have one of those that gets nervous when you even go to the bathroom. So I usually try and help the dog kind of learn, you can be over here and I can be over here, and it's okay, And I'm sure you get a lot of anxious dogs in, and this is one of the big things I do. I get a ton of these types of dogs in. And a lot of people are afraid to take them to boarding. They're afraid of separating from the dog. So that's one of the first things. Don't be afraid to separate from the dog. The dog will go through a stress period, of course, but normally they will calm right down. They'll be okay once they get over that little hump. And if you do it while you're home, you can mitigate any huge destructive reactions. Like if you have a dog that's tearing up crates or furniture, you can simulate leaving. You can have somebody still in the house kind of working with the dog, and then someone leaves, they come right back. Get the dog used to that kind of scenario. But also when you're bringing up a new dog or a puppy, get them used to being separated, and it's not, 8 hours at a time, or it's not a big deal. Show them, kind of let them get through it. The place command works really well for this with the dogs that have really bad separation anxiety, like they turn into a nervous wreck when you even leave the room. Put them on a place and let them be around while you walk through your house and get away from them a little bit, and they're okay. The other thing that can help with it is an appropriate toy that they like, something to chew on, something to mess with when their anxiety kicks in. Because if they don't have anything to kind of mess with, they're going to find something to do, usually. Do you have anything to add to that, Nate?
The big thing is the routine. Of course, you're always going to hear or at least read articles where it says, well, the dog might be bored, the dog might not have enough daily mental stimulation, the dog may not be physically active enough, and by doing these things, that could help, which of course it can. If you are training your dog on a regular basis, often that does minimize the possibilities of having a lot of these issues. But you nailed it when you said people are going to leave their house and then all of a sudden the dog picks up on these cues. Oh, you're grabbing your keys, you're putting on your jacket, you're grabbing your backpack or whatever it is, and you're leaving, and now you're not going to come back till I don't know when. And so they start freaking out. And yeah, I love using crates for this, just putting the dogs in and out of the crate randomly throughout the day, even if they are house trained or potty trained, just to get them used to being comfortable, not having to be attached to the human's hip throughout the day. And yeah, so I think you nailed it perfectly. A lot of times it is caused by what we do as humans, but of course there are going to be people that have issues where it's genetics. And just because it's genetics, of course, doesn't mean we can't work on it, but we may have to take, longer steps, or more steps rather, to get the dog to that point. So like I was thinking about it with your daycare one. I had a client before that wanted to be able to leave their dog at the daycare facility, but of course the moment that the owner would leave, the dog was freaking out, and that was causing issues. So what I recommended, and luckily enough the daycare facility was able to accommodate this for them. It was like a local one in Los Angeles. And so she would come down with the dog and she would stay in the building with the dog for a little bit. The dog can hang out, see her, everything's good, and then they would leave. And then she would go and then leave and come back after a short duration. So she had to build up to get to the point where the dog was confident and comfortable with it. But it's just like you said, it's taking those little steps to get to that point and not rushing it, of course.
Yeah, and if you make a big deal, like, a lot of us when we come home, we're so excited to see our dog, but we do kind of the opposite when we leave. So we kind of get emotionally upset when we leave the dog too, because we're worried about the dog being so anxious while we're gone. So if you can kind of, separate that in your human brain as well, to say, I'm going to be confident, you're going to be okay. See you later, talk to you later, and walk out the door, instead of the big drama. I'll be back, in a bunch of hugs and kisses, and we can do all that. But if you make a big drama, change it every day, or get out of that routine so the dog doesn't immediately go into that mode.
That's another excellent point. People do that as well. When they leave, they hug, they kiss their dog, they make it a big deal. They do the same thing when they get back, and that could create issues as well. And if somebody does that, I always say, go ahead and do that, but don't do it right when you leave, and don't do it right when you get back. Do it 5 minutes before you leave. That's usually enough time. And when you come back, wait 5 minutes before you give them the big hello. Walk in and just be like, what's up, Ari? And then go about your business. And then 5 minutes after that, hey, and give them all that love and attention. And so they're not going to associate it with the coming and going. And of course, keeping that anxiety down. All right, the next, I love this one because we hear it all the time. And often it's misinterpreting what the dog is doing, and we call it one thing, and when it's actually something else. Begging for food.
So begging's another thing. Most dogs are going to do this when there's food around, especially if we give them food from the table. This is another common thing that people think dog trainers don't do, that we do sometimes do. I've shared many a meal with my dogs, but I still don't like begging. I don't want to be something staring at me right here while I'm eating and breathing on my food, things like that. So when you have a dog that's begging, the first thing you want to do is not create it. So you're never going to get something from me, from my plate, if you're sitting here staring at me. Okay, my dogs know that. So you can teach that to your dog. Give them a piece of food, or, you don't even have to give them anything off your plate. You can have a little their kibble sitting right there. Give them a little piece of their kibble when they're sitting over there on the other side of the room if you want. I would start it, however, by getting through meals without them getting anything there, okay? Just don't even pay attention to the dog. If they're coming up under your feet or they are sitting incessantly beside the table and you don't want them there, I would teach the dog a place, show them you can stay over here, or tell them to down or something away from the table. If they get up, I'll say, no, get back over there. You can reward that way. You can go to them, give them a piece of food or a treat or their dog treats or anything like that. Or you can wait till you're all the way done, clean the dishes up, do whatever you want to do, and free the dog off of their place or their down or whatever they were doing before. You can kind of set boundaries with this one wherever you want them. If you don't want them near the table, you can set a boundary that they kind of stay away. If you don't want them, if you want them, you don't care if they're near the table, you just don't want them staring at you, do not give that food or anything to them, or even looking at them and talking to them. What do you want? What are you doing? That keeps them all right there beside you. Okay, it's kind of like a little reward in itself. So I try to never reward the behavior I don't want, even by accident. So if that dog's there and they're sitting staring, I'm either going to redirect them over to do something else, or I will not acknowledge them at all. And you'll start to see that they'll go do something else because they're like, well, this isn't what I thought it was going to be here. And the place command works wonders for this if you want to train that.
Yeah, definitely. I love the place command. That's my favorite go-to when it comes to begging. And ignoring them, that can work as well. But of course, that could take longer. The good thing is our dogs are very situational. So often, because I encourage people to always do engagement training or loading the markers, whatever it is that we want to call it. And when we do engagement training, of course, we're paying our dogs to look at us. So when we have food in our hand and we're first starting to train, the dog goes, oh, you have food. I look at you, I get some of that food. So then when we sit down at the dinner table, the dog goes, oh, you got food. I look at you, you hook me up with some of that food. So that's why I love the climb command. I tell everybody this, either put the dog on a climb, basically tell the dog what you want them to do in that situation. Because if we've done that engagement training, they're going to want to come over and stare at us. They're like, hey, we got a deal, right? I look at you, you hook me up. This is how it works out. And that's why I was saying that it's good how situational dogs are, because they can separate the two and go, okay, when you're sitting down with your plate of food, I'm not going to get anything. And often what ends up happening, like you said, they get bored, walk away, and lay down. It's kind of funny, random quick story. This was before I was a dog trainer. My golden retriever, I would give her pieces of food all the time. And often I would eat when I would give her her meal. So I would set down her bowl of food and then I would sit down with my food. She'd watch me the entire time just in case I'd give her a piece. And once I was done and I take my plate to the sink to clean it, once I went to the sink, she knew that she wasn't getting any more, and that's when she would go and eat her food. But she would always sit there and wait, hoping she would get some of my food, because of course she enjoyed it more than her food, which was always pretty funny. All right, moving on. Last question, and this is another big one, of course, destructive behaviors, whether it's ripping up toilet paper, chewing up the carpet, chewing on furniture. People run into this issue all the time. What have been the techniques that you've used that's been most successful with this?
So the funny part about destructive behavior, really a lot of these, common issues are, there's a simple part and a hard part. The hard part is you've got to see it in order to correct it. So a lot of people just don't watch their dog. Their dog has already done the thing long before they know. The toilet paper is already clear across the room for half an hour before we even catch the dog doing it. So you want to, if you have a dog that's becoming destructive, number one, crates will help you tremendously, crate training, if it's when you're leaving, okay? If you leave your house and your dog is destroying the house while you're gone, a crate will do wonders for that behavior. And sometimes if you can view it as, in that scenario, when you leave the house and you have a destructive dog, we can't see when they're doing it, we can't be there. A lot of times that dog is anxious when you're gone, and that anxious behavior leads to roaming around and getting into stuff. If they have a crate, which is like their little den, their safe place, they don't have to worry as much in that crate when you're gone. They're not thinking about what in the world do I need to do with my time. They're just in their crate, probably sleeping. If you have one that's doing this while you're at the house, you've got to catch it. So my first, order of business is to watch the dog, monitor the dog. If you're in your house with your dog, you should know where they're at and what they're doing at all times, okay? And this is the hard part to get through because that's a lot of monitoring, I know. The second they go to do something, so your timing's big here too. You want them to know, and they can very easily learn this, just like Nate was saying with the begging. They can learn appropriate things to bite and toy with and not appropriate things for sure. So I also make a pretty big impression with the stuff I don't want them chewing on. If I turn around and I'm looking at my dog and they start gnawing on my kitchen table, I have a big no and I go over and make sure they stop doing that, okay? Whether I just pull them away from it, show them that there's something else they can chew on, give them a bone or a toy, say, here, chew on this, not that. But the hard part's catching them every time they do that. We want them to never really touch that furniture without us saying, hey, no, don't do that, go do this. Okay, that's pretty successful, but you have to catch it. That's the hard part that people kind of fall away from. They have every intention of watching their dog, but then the next thing you know, they're like, I just looked away for 1 second. So dedicate to that watching them, even if you just dedicate to it for a week, just catching them doing this, it'll make such a huge difference. And I do redirect in this situation, give them their appropriate things to chew on. Next thing you know, they're hunting those things down instead of your furniture, things like that. Furniture is really fun to chew on for dogs. It breaks apart, it's wood. Sometimes they pull on it and it tears. So that's a really fun activity. And if you don't catch it, you're not going to be able to stop it.
Yeah, and just like you said, if you don't provide them with something else to replace that, dogs need to chew, especially puppies. They're going through that teething period. They need something to chew. And of course, if we don't provide it for them, they'll find one on their own. And I really like how you said the crate as well. Often people are asking me, what do we need a crate for? And I always say you need it for house training and you need it for potty training. Well, what is potty training? Of course, we know it's the dog not going to the bathroom in the house. What is house training? Well, the dog behaving in the house. If you're still having to correct the dog for chewing on furniture, if you're still having to correct the dog for going into places they're not supposed to be, then you still need a crate. And I always recommend too, even after the dog's done being house trained and potty trained, keep the crate, because dogs, as you said, they like their den, they like their safe place to go, place of comfort. Now, I haven't used this option. I've used it maybe a couple times, if that, and I never really had much success with it. So I'm kind of curious if you've used it or if you had clients use it and if they've had much success. But those different sprays that are supposed to be a deterrent to get the dog not to chew.
Yep, I've had people use them. The most success I see is very, very small puppies. Very young puppies. I've also had the opposite happen where the dog likes that taste for some reason. So everything they spray it on, the dog wants to lick it off and, chew it off of there. So I've had that happen too. It's much more effective to just stop the behavior or catch them and make sure you tell them that we don't want to chew on that, we want to chew on this.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. That's, the way I always look at it is if it's dangerous or destructive, the way I like to keep my playbook is it's going to be corrected. Dangerous and destructive behaviors, I just feel the need. I'm going to correct it right away. I don't want to risk the bitter apple spray not working, because of course, like you said, if they end up liking it, now it's even a bigger issue. So sometimes just setting the dog up to fail, correcting them in the act, getting it out of their repertoire, and giving them, of course, something better to chew on. All right, I got one more question for you. I know we were only going over the 5. Any dog training books you might recommend?
I definitely, so it's kind of a more, it's like a dog trainer's book, but I think that clients or anyone interested in dogs would be really beneficial to read, but it's called Successful Together. I have to look up the, it's a European book, I think, so I'd have to look up the author again, but I think it's a group of people kind of that came together to write this book. But it's got a ton of tips, and I do like the Ivan book we've talked about before. It's a Schutzen book. It's called Schutzen, I believe, by Ivan Balabanov. But Ivan has a really interesting outlook on dog training, and it comes through in that book.
He's incredible. He's a very good dog trainer, and you've worked directly with him a couple times too, right?
I consider him a friend. He's got a whole different outlook, viewpoint, kind of, than a lot of people have that I really like. It's a lot of play-based. He definitely, uses corrections when appropriate and everything, but it's very play-based and interaction-based, and I really like that.
Any other books or any last saved rounds? Any golden nuggets that you can give out to anybody who might be struggling, or even someone who's becoming or wanting to become a professional dog trainer?
Yeah, so if you want to become a professional dog trainer, get out there and train. Go to a school. Go look up some seminars. I will encourage you to not jump into what happened to me kind of in the beginning of method circling. Like I would try one method for 1 week and then jump to another and jump to another because I just did a whole bunch of education right away. So you'll confuse yourself and your dog that way. So, get out there with a bunch of different people if you want to become a dog trainer. A lot of trainers are hesitant to take in apprentices. That's just a thing in the industry, but a lot of us love that as well. So go out, talk to people, get training. YouTube's a great place to learn, but be careful who you're watching. And go to the tippity top people. Go to the Ivan Balabanovs. Look at their stuff. They have a lot of stuff out there. I know a lot of Schutzhund trainers have websites. A lot of people like Nate have websites that can show you so much on the internet. In golden nugget wise, I would say really focus on the dog you have. A lot of clients I work with sort of want their dog to be a different dog. And if they would just embrace who their dog is, they would see that dog is actually more than they ever could have dreamed of. If they just give that dog a chance, learn that dog, and kind of check your expectations and work together. It's a process. There's no really end to training. I'm sure Nate would say the same thing. It's like a lifestyle change, but it's so fun, and your bond with your dog will grow so much if you train. So I encourage you to just train, get out there, do it, get to know your dog, and make it fun.
Yeah, training is hands down one of the best things somebody can do to build a strong relationship for their dog. Again, I completely agree with that. Well, thank you again for coming out. I really appreciate it. I'm going to put all your contact information in the description of this video. So if anybody is local to you, or they want to reach out, or they have any questions, they'll be able to do that as well. And I'm going to put those books that you recommended. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Nice talk.
All right. And that's a wrap, guys. We'll see you in the next video.